I think it's let us introduce ourselves for a few minutes before we start off, and
Yes.
I think we could, you can slightly introduce. I don't think that everybody read the book yet because it's just out here in Holland.
Yeah.
In Dutch at least. Maybe a few people read the English version, and now Gijsbrecht is reading the English
I read it.
Yuri read it as well. And then maybe you can briefly introduce the theme of the book and why it's important and why it's a matter nowadays. Let me first start introducing us. Yuri, can you start?
Sure. My name is Yuri van Geest, one of the co-founders of Quantified Self Europe in Amsterdam, and that's ambassador for Singularity University, based in Silicon Valley, and co-organizer of TEDx Amsterdam. Are you in Silicon Valley right now? Sorry, I missed your comment. I said, are you in California right now? No, I'm in Holland right now. Okay.
Gijsbrecht.
Okay. I'm Gijsbrecht Brouwer. I'm one of the founders of Social Media Club Rotterdam, which is actually hosting this hangout. And I'm a good friend of Sander, who is your publisher here in Holland, of course. I'm publisher of a blog on sports, the future of sports in Holland called Sport Next. And I do a lot of work on the future of sports also as a strategist and a consultant.
Thanks, Gijsbrecht. Jurgen, can I ask you to or put the microphone a little bit further away from your... Yes, exactly, because it's scratching and therefore every time we hear some sounds.
Okay, good.
And introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jurgen Apollo. I'm an author, though not as famous as Kevin. I wrote a book called Management 3.0, which is available worldwide, and the Chinese version was just released. I'm very proud of that.
Congratulations.
And one thing that I like, I read your previous book, Kevin, Out of Control, and it was a big inspiration, because I am heavily into complex adaptive systems. And of course you wrote an entire book about such systems. So I made use of it and referred to it in my book, and I refer to dozens of other works as well. So thank you for writing that and inspiring me.
You're welcome.
So yeah, that's my background.
Thanks, Jurgen. Jurka, maybe you can share a little bit of information about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Jurka. Besides being a market researcher, I'm also a blogger, and I try to do blogs, but also sometimes short radio columns about technology, and mostly about technology and sociology, because, well, sociology is my actual field, so it's nice to see what impact technology can have on society, or vice versa, of course.
Great.
Okay, thanks. My name is Jeroen. I'm with Gijsbrecht, one of the co-founders of Social Media Club Rotterdam. Thanks for reaching out to us and giving us this opportunity to spend 1 hour of your precious time with us. That's like perfect. I work as a consultant for a full-service e-commerce agency, and we provide the sophisticated technological solutions for e-tailers and retailers here in Holland.
Okay, great. So
that's us.
Yes, and you know me. There was mentioned the quantified self, which is a kind of current interest, self-tracking. I actually have my Fitbit right here, which I'm wearing, and that's this idea of trying to track self-tracking and what we can do with that. But let me talk about what technology wants. That's the reason we're gathered here. A Dutch version will come out, and I think there's so many things I could start with. And the one thing I think I want to talk about is the fact that I believe, through my own research, that there is a positive direction to technology. There's inherently a positive force.
a charge, like an electrical charge. It's the positive electrical charge that is moving through technology, because technology as a system is extended coming from life. So it retains the same charge that life has. And we generally think of life as being good. We don't think of life as being neutral. We don't say, a baby, oh, it's neutral. No, we say it's good. It's good to be in the world. Life in general is good. The more life, the better. The more variety of life, the more species of life, the more complexity of life, the better. And I'm arguing in the book that technium as a system is an extension of that same forces of self-creation and self-organization that make life, are now making the technium, and that because it's following the same kind of the evolutionary trajectory through the cosmos, that it also has a progression in it. And this is the more controversial part. The idea that there's any kind of direction in evolution is very controversial. And people like the late Stephen Jay Gould, the evolutionary biologist, argued through book after book after book why there's no direction. On the other hand, there was a bunch of evolutionary biologists like Richard Dawkins who argue the contrary, that in fact evolution wants to make certain things like eyeballs or wings. If you rewind the tape, it keeps making the same thing again and again. That's coversion evolution. And I take his side, and so I look at the trends in evolution and say that they're being extended by the technium. If you want to understand where technology will be in the future, we can look at where it's been in evolution, and that direction is towards increasing complexity, increasing speciation, meaning there's more species of things. They go from the general to the specific. Things go from the simple to the complex. They go from the one to the many, because increasing diversity. They go from alone to together, increasing mutualism. And so we can say, we can take something today and say, well, whatever it is, it's going to be more specialized in the future. It's going to be more complex in the future. It's not going to be simpler. It's going to be more codependent on other technologies, and it's going to be increasing the evolvability of the entire system. And we can think of the technium as primarily a way in which the forces that run through life can make new organisms in this possibility space that DNA itself is not able to reach. So it can make, for instance, new ways of thinking that a tissue could not do, like a calculator, for instance, but that technology can do. So technology, the technium, is in some ways populating the universe with things and possibilities that that DNA cannot reach. Okay? So that's sort of the summary. Well, that's really great. The echo stopped. I'm not sure why that is, but that's good.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I really like your work since '94, so as you know, I'm a big fan of yours.
Yeah.
I also read similar books like yours, Ray Kurzweil, Brian Arthur, recently Abundance, the work by Peter Diamandis, Matt Whitley. These are all quite optimistic visions about the future.
Yeah.
How is your vision different from these authors? Because I think they're quite similar.
Yeah, in many ways, one of the commonalities that we have is we take the idea of progress as a reality. We acknowledge the idea that there's been progress in human history, and I extend that to say that that progress is actually rooted in a cosmic force. And so I don't think Peter's and Matt Ridley's and Brian's take the kind of cosmic view of saying that not only has this been true in human history, it's also true in evolutionary biology, but it's also true in the cosmos. So we see self-organization and progress happening in the early universe from the Big Bang onwards, where you see elements that they do the same things. They start off as simple things and they become more complex. So we have simple elements, hydrogen and helium, and we have the complexification, the speciation of the elements in this self-organized process. We see heavenly bodies, the same thing, becoming more and more diverse, more and more complex, and more mutualistic, and the evolvability of the whole thing accelerating. And so that's one difference, is that I think that, that there's an innate self-organization thread and running through the universe, and it's a continuous accumulative thread. And so life on this planet is derived from this sort of thread that's running in the midst of, of entropy. This entropy is, the universe is running down, except for these little threads where it's running up, where we have increasing order, these exotropic threads in the universe of entropy. And part of that thread, as it keeps building up, self-organizing more and more order, produces life, and then minds, and from minds comes the technium, the technology, which is a kind of another alternative, seventh kingdom of life, or alternative nature. It's going to become as complex as the natural world. And that's sort of what we're getting a hint of with this internet technology. Is we're beginning to see the degree of its complexity, and that's the argument I made in my first book, that the world of the born, DNA, biology, and the world of the made are actually two facets of the same system, which is this system of self-organization, self-organized complexity, and the behaviors will be very similar. And there's a couple places we can talk about ways in which the technium is different from biology, and there's one or two ways it is, but it shares an awful lot of those same attributes and same basic dynamics. And so that's the main difference.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Kevin. I agree that Stephen Jay Gould argued against the progress in life that he didn't see, and like you, I think that there is inherent, there's a trend towards increasing complexity, so maybe he sort of confused the two words. There is obviously more and more complexity, but the scientists agree, and Richard Dawkins as well, that self-organization is valueless. There is no inherent good or bad about self-organization. It just is, as I said in my book as well. Gravity is also not good or bad. It just exists, and it's up to you to do something with it.
Right.
So I don't really understand why you call that increasing complexity something that is good, because for me it's just there.
Yes. So the good part of it is not so much in the complexity. I mean, the value part of it is not so much in the complexity. The value part of it is in this other aspect. And again, there's many progressive trends, but the primary one that I'm focusing on, the technium, the one that I think has a moral value, is the increasing possibilities that these things make. So this is what we get from life. This is what we get from the technium. So one of the things I talk about in the book is that every new invention, every new technology will produce almost as many problems as solutions. And so, in a certain sense, we're inventing problems all the time, and more problems, and more complex problems, and the problems have a lot of the similar attributes that the solutions have. And most of the problems, excuse me, we're dealing with in our lives in society today have their root in some technological invention of the past. And I'm 100% positive that in the future, most of the problems that people will have then are technogenic, and they will be problems that we're inventing for them today. Okay, and so there would be a tendency to say, well, there's just technology is neutral. All this stuff is neutral, and that there is, on the one hand, on the other hand, it's kind of black and white, and it makes it kind of gray. And I'm saying that here's where it's different, and this very crucial difference, and that is that if you can kind of imagine the first tool, whatever it is, hammer, stone hammer, that stone hammer facilitated, allowed that Neanderthal, whoever, to both construct something which we would consider positive, or kill somebody which we would consider harmful. We have a value, but and then again you can say, well, that kind of evens out. But here's the thing: that tool provides a choice, a possibility to do those things that never existed before, and that possibility is a positive. And that's what we are moving to. That's what civilization is all about. That's the positive aspect. If you believe that civilization at all is a positive, it's because it has these expansion of choices and opportunities. And that's what the technology brings us. It's brought about by expanding possibilities, options, choices, freedoms, freedom of choices, freedom of directions. And that is the positive thing that the technium brings us. That's why people, by the hundreds of millions throughout history and now today, are leaving villages, beautiful organic food, very strong families, tremendously supportive communities, a great sense of who they are. They're trudging from these places and moving to the slums of cities, because even in the slums, they have more choices and possibilities, and that's what we find good. So that's where the positive dimension comes from.
And would you also agree that this depends on your perspective, whether you think civilization is something that is good or desirable?
No, I'm saying this is an objective reality. You have to acknowledge the fact that civilization is a positive, that progress is real. That's civilization.
Okay.
Yeah, real might not mean positive per se. If you compare technium to the living to the mate, or the technium to the biology, as part of biology, we sort of came up with a concept of value or morality. Will technology or the technium do the same, or will it find a place to do that?
Yes, I mean I do agree with you that we have invented moral systems and laws and things. These are technologies. These are products of our minds. These are things that we have invented, and so you could say, well, we invented the idea of positive value, and that may be true too.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that what I think, to echo what you said, is that we have invented our humanity. Humanity is a technological invention. We've domesticated other animals, including, say, herding, milk-producing animals. And once we did that, once we domesticated those herding animals, we very rapidly genetically evolved lactose tolerance in adults for some of our population. So we changed our genetics forever. We modified our own beings through our invention of domestication. The same thing happened with cooking, where cooking kind of like we invented an external stomach and pots and fire, and we used that to digest food that we could not digest biologically. That additional nutrition modified our jaws, the shape of our jaws and the size of our teeth, so that we became permanently dependent on cooking for long-term fertility. And so, again, we modified ourselves through this process of invention. And so I say that the first domesticated animal were humans. We domesticated ourselves. That's the first animal we domesticated, and we've made ourselves, so we are self-created. And when you have self-creation, it's a very curious place to be in, because it means that we are the creator and we are the created. We are the masters and we are the servants. And so we are the masters of technologies, but we are the slaves of technology, and that tension, it will always be with us because we are self-created. We are technological ourselves. And so when I talk about the technium and the increasing autonomy of the technium, it's a very hard thing to unravel because we are part of the technium. The 6 billion people on the internet are part of the internet. Okay? And so we have to understand that we're kind of complicit in this thing to a very large degree. We cannot be removed from it. And while the system itself, the technium, is increasing in autonomy, it's not autonomous. There is no 100% autonomy. It's just increasing its autonomy. We are part of that system. We are technology.
And should we, as a part of this technium, try to increase our influence in it, or even our moral influence in it?
Yes, and so this issue of free will and influence and choice. So one of the places I changed my mind about. I mean, again, I set off on this book in a very legitimate quest of not knowing what to think about, where to put the technology, and I arrived at a place that I didn't really want to arrive at, but that's what the evidence sort of showed, and that was this idea that, in fact, both within evolution and within the technium, there is I think, a deeply baked-in progression of forms that will be found no matter how many times you run the system, and so that means that there are, to kind of cut to the chase, that there is inevitabilities built into the technium as well as evolution. Whenever you use that word inevitable, man, that just raises the flags. But what that means is that there are certain large-scale forms of technology, excuse me, that are inevitable, that will occur in any planetary civilization anywhere in the world, anywhere in the galaxies, I should say, and that will be rediscovered in again and again. And by the way, we see that in invention on Earth right now. That simultaneous independent invention is the norm. It's what happens every time. Things are invented simultaneously, independently, all the time. It's not just a lone person. Because when it's time, when all the supporting, auxiliary, supplemental ecosystem of ideas are in place, that next one is inevitable. And there's inevitability to the large-scale structures of things at the sort of what we say at the genre level, at the level of kind of, four-footed animals. They're going to happen because they happen again and again. Legs, bilateral symmetry, tubular gut, camera eyeballs, little tiny brains. These are things that happen again and again. Evolution kind of wants to make these things. And so what's not inevitable is the actual species of these. These are completely contingent, with all those details. And the same thing in the technium. The large-scale things like a web, electronic web around the world was inevitable. What was not inevitable was the character, the expression of this web, whether it was open or closed, national or transnational, non-profit or for-profit, whether it was based on this particular protocol or that one, whether it was flexible or adaptive. All these things, we have choice about them, and they make a huge difference to us. And so that's where our sort of choice is. And so we can look up ahead and say, human cloning, this is inevitable. We cannot stop it. What we have is a choice of what's the character of this technology? Who owns it? Who runs it? How's it regulated? Is there profit? All these issues. we don't have any choice about it's coming. We know it's coming because we already have it in nature. We have parallel clones. They're called twins. We'll make serial clones, and what we have a choice about is the context and the expression of this inevitable technology. And the same things about robot-driven cars, and we go through a list of things that are inevitable, and the speciation, the actual specifics, are not inevitable, even though the larger form is.
So I have a question about your work in terms of the biggest worry that you have. If you look at the worries by Bill Joy 10 years ago, or the worries people have about singularity in terms of privacy, security, spam, unintended consequences, convergence, it can be anything. So my question is, what is your biggest concern right now if you look into the future of technology?
Yeah. So I actually talk about this in the book. Bill Joy, who wrote an article for Wired, was concerned about what I label the grin technologies. These are four sets or four varieties of technologies that self-replicate. So you have computer viruses, computer stuff. You have robotic stuff, which robots could make other robots and replicate. You have genetic engineering stuff, and you have nanotechnology. So these four things of genetics, robotics, information stuff, nano, all have the capability of doing self-replication ad infinitum. And whenever you have self-replication, things can get very swerve away into out of control areas very, very fast. And that is something that we should worry about. And so if we launch these self-replicating systems, we need to be really very clever and smart about instilling in them some kind of guidance, internal inherent guidance, once they're away from us. It's like children. Children are self-replicating technology. And so at a certain point they leave us and they go on to replicate, and our only hope is to train them, to instill in them certain values and certain heuristics, so that when they go off on their own, we are kind of, in a certain sense, controlling them by having instilled in them some kind of values or governing principles or something, so they can go off and do good things. And I think the same thing about these technologies. They'll be much more like children to us, where we need to, and we worry about our children all the time. No matter who we are, no matter how good they are, we worry about them. And so we'll worry about these technologies, wanting to put into them some kind of governing principles, something that can be replicated itself over time, so that we can, when they do start to self-replicate on their own, that they'll go in a direction where it's increasing choices and options, which is what we call good.
Okay, I have one final question.
Yeah.
I saw some amazing talks at TED this week about liquid metal energy, tricorders, a lot of exponential technologies moving forward. So my question is, if you look at the rate of technological change right now, and look at social inequality, economic inequality, and if you look forward, do you think this will be a big concern? There will be a growing gap, or do you think we might dampen this inequality in society and the world at large?
Yeah, I think the inequality, and I think inequality will be balanced as much as possible through the market as we can hope for. I think the but the problem is that whether we want to wait. I mean, whether we're going to wait for the market to solve this. I think the market can solve it, but it may not be as fast as we would like. However, anybody has to be completely amazed by the penetration of cell phones in the world, because that mobile technology does give us hope that reaching and plugging everybody into this global economy may happen faster than we thought it can. We still have issues of clean water, education. I mean, people may have cell phones, but they still don't have toilets, which is, I mean, I've seen this happen again and again when you give people a choice of, hey, do you want a toilet or a cell phone? They always take the cell phone. And they find that that's far more valuable to them. And that may be short-term thinking, I don't know. But in any case, I think the economics, it kind of make a distinction between equality of ownership and equality of I don't know what you call it, output. But I really believe that what we really wanted to emphasize is equality of opportunity. And so everybody in the world's not going to be equal. We know that, and I think part of the inherent dynamic of a system, a new economy, is that there's not going to be everybody's not going to be at the same level. But we really do want to make sure everybody has an equal opportunity, and that is, I think that's where we can focus. And I think technology can allow that to happen faster than we might think, in terms of really trying to bring equal opportunity to everybody. Whether what they do with it is sort of not going to be equal. So that's my hope. We are a part of the technium, and following on your answer, yeah.
People might be not waiting for technology to come to them, but might be going to technology, as you see in a world which is urbanizing at a very rapidly state. What do you think of that? Is maybe we are going for the technology instead of technology coming to us, or how do you see that?
I'm sure it's both happening. Again, there is a sense in which the technium wants more people to use it. It wants to become ubiquitous. There's definitely a sense in which the technium itself is trying to make the world more conducive to more technology. It's definitely in this sort of self-organizing principle of trying to maximize itself. And so in that sense, it's doing a thing. We are playing along with it. It wants us. But at the same time, as I said, there's two sides to this. We want it. And, so it's a true love affair in that sense. We're serving it. It's serving us. There's a symbiotic relationship here. We both benefit, and so I don't think we can really unravel to what degree is our dependency on technology serving technology, and to what degree is it serving us. Both are happening.
But you see cities or urbanization as part of the technium, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So the cities are one of the largest technologies that we've made, and that urbanization, again, I read that as people moving in. What a city gives you is increased choices and opportunities and degrees of freedom. And that's what the city is. It's sort of an opportunity machine.
Exactly. And would a diverse city make it a better city in that opportunity? Or yes? Yes,
I think diversity is, again, I think we assign a value to diversity. We can say diversity just is.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's true. I believe that diversity is good. It's good because it increases choices and opportunities. That is a good thing. What is good? I mean, you have to come up with some definition of good. For me, the definition of good is increasing choices and opportunities. That is good. That's by definition, and so that's what we get.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yuri?
I was thinking about the paradox of choice, but I do agree with you, Kevin, on this.
Yeah, the paradox of choice, for those who don't know, is it's this idea that we can have so many choices that becomes paralyzing, that we don't have enough cycles to evaluate all the choices, and therefore we kind of shut down and we don't make a choice at all, whether that's walking into the grocery store with 56 different varieties of mustard and we can't decide, or whether we have healthcare options and we can't decide. To answer this kind of earlier question about the accelerating rate, if we look at the future, we look at sort of like there'll be 2,000 varieties of mustard on the shelf, and there'll be 2,000 more choices of how to cut your health care, and or there'll be 60 billion songs, or 200 million films to watch. How can we possibly deal with that? And I think the answer is not that we're going to want fewer choices. The answer is, I have a very technocentric view of the world. The answer is that we're going to invent new technology, new choices that help us manage those other choices. And here's a simple example, and I think one of the most underrated inventions of the world. That is the invention of the default. Yeah. What is a default? A default is a simple technology that hides your choices until you're ready for them.
Yeah.
Okay? And so any kind of complex software, there's all kinds of choices that you have that says, okay, don't make them now. We'll assign one. And whenever you want, you can, when you're smart enough or educated enough or old enough, you can come back and you can begin to use these choices. And so that's the most primitive variety. But imagine things that were 100 times more powerful, or 100 times as many ways in which we invented things like recommendation engines and other things, to technologies to help us facilitate the fact that we have too many choices.
But there's also the notion that making a choice also sort of nullifies or sort of diminishes any other choices you could have made instead of that choice, and thereby moving you or technology in a certain direction. Would you say that this is also could diversify in the future, like getting sort of Gibson-esque society where different groups who have made different choices in technology still live in the same society, sort of? But
yes, I think sometimes when we make a choice, we are precluding other choices by that choice. And I think the art is to try and always choose the thing that will do that the least. In other words, it will give you the most choices, or to abandon the least choices, so that you're constantly expanding the circle. But lots of times you think that a new technology comes along will obliterate and displace entirely the old technology, but it doesn't happen. In fact, I did this long kind of campaign to prove to myself, which I was unable to do, that this is what happened, because in fact the opposite happens, which is that there is no technologies that have gone extinct, globally extinct. They often become obsolete in the sense that they diminish, but they don't completely ever disappear. And that's one of the differences between the technium and biology is that in biological evolution, extinction is the norm. In technological evolution, extinction is the rarity. And so mostly what happens is new technology comes in, and the old technologies are diminished, but they don't go away. They kind of become supplemental. You get this increasing pool of choices. And so whatever media it is that if you're really interested in, including lantern slideshows or cuneiform or letterpress, you can still get that. That's still an option for you, even though it may be very rare and sidelined. It's still there. And paper books for the next century will be available at a very high price. Opera, people are still going to opera. So these things are shoved to the side, but they're not obliterated, because actually, right now today, in terms of media, we have incredible choices because all those past choices are still there. If you wanted to live without reading and writing, if you wanted to be illiterate, there are many illiterate people in the world, you can participate in oral culture. You don't have to have the alphabet, although that's a really tough one to avoid.
And what I like, what I hadn't thought of before, is that we are, as people, are part of the technium. Do you think we are integrating more with the other parts of the technium? Say,
yes.
you discussed the Fitbit, so this will more and more connections between other parts of the technium and us as people.
Yes, I mean, we are becoming cybernetic. People talk about cyborgs. We are already cyborgian in many ways with our modifications of laser eyes, glasses, teeth fillings, implants, repairs on our body. But, with this kind of Google devices being completely always on, we'll obviously keep going in that direction, and we'll offload more of our thinking and remembering to this stuff. And become, constantly dependent on it. And as long as it's up, we will continue to go that way. And when it's down, we will miss it terribly. I was telling friends about someone we know whose daughter misbehaved, and she was grounded, punished for her transaction. And the way that they punished her was, a teenage girl, they took away her mobile phone. She became physically ill. She was throwing up. She was weak. She couldn't get up. It was like an amputation. I mean, that's how severe it was. And I think that's sort of I think that's where we're going. Where our being would be dependent on technology. But one thing I want to say about that, the days in which we have become wholly dependent on technology passed about 10,000 years ago. I mean, this is not a new thing. If you took every single bit of technology off of this planet, I mean, every knife, control fire, every piece of clothing, humans would last maybe 6 weeks. I mean, we are babies without technology. We cannot survive without knives and fire and clothing and structures. We don't have we borrow animal claws, we make knives because we don't have them. I mean, we would just be sitting ducks. We would die instantly. So the point in which we are wholly dependent on our survival for technology passed a long time ago. But we're now dependent on more sophisticated technology as well, and we will continue doing so.
Okay, Kevin, how can we help you? Do you have a question for us, or something that's?
Yeah. Here's a question I'm wrestling with myself. I'm wrestling with this idea of ownership and data. I'm really curious. Okay, do you guys own? Do you feel you own your face?
If we own our faces?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I own my face. Yes.
Okay. Do you all feel that way?
I'm a little bit mixed here.
It's
okay.
tough. Right. Yeah.
I mean, you probably referring to portrayal right? Or
I'm just interested in our sense of ownership.
Okay. Yeah.
And identity, and then information. I'm really struggling with understanding how ownership works in a world of information, because it's not adding up correctly. And as I try to imagine the world we're going into, I'm having trouble seeing how the notion of ownership is not radically altered in some ways, but I don't know what that way is. So I'm kind of playing it out to get a sense of what we inherently feel right now. Do we feel like we own do you own your genes? Do you feel you own your genetic makeup? Is that something?
I have a particular vision on this topic because it's heartfelt. I also have my own DNA profile. So my personal long-term vision is that it's similar to your view, but also a little bit different. So I want to be owner of my own data, unlike the current situation in which different DNA-based startups or companies, they own my DNA profile. That's stupid. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think that will change. There's another issue. If you look at the singularity technologies underlying, it's basically it increases all the options. So it makes the authentic more important. So my authentic face, my authentic data or presence might become even more important in the future relative to now. Yet there is a counter argument. The counter argument is that it's difficult to uphold privacy in the future. It's in the sense we get scanned everywhere by companies, by persons, by people, by governments. So how can we protect our face? That's a good question. I don't know.
So when you say you want to own your genetic data, why would just having total access to it be sufficient?
Access would be perfect, but I would like to have a sense of control, double opt-in, permission-based, rights management for different stakeholders, instead of the current way in which it seems to be reversed.
I like the question by Kevin, because who gave you the ownership of your DNA? You know, for 99.something%, it's exactly the same as mine. So why? So for 99%, you're owner of my DNA as well. So I feel the struggle with Kevin. Like, what's mine? Maybe only the 1% or the 1.1% where I'm different than the rest of the world is mine. You know, what's mine? What's yours?
Right, and then when you discover someone else that may even share those other genes, you'll discover that probably none of your genes are unique, or maybe there's two. You're left with two genes. Oh, this is me. 2 genes.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So I'm trying to imagine a world where we have access to things but not ownership. I agree. You talked about control, and control is, well, for a person who wrote the book Out of Control. Control to me is another slippery thing that I'm trying to struggle with, because again, if you have self-replicating information, how much control do we really have over that? So yesterday I had this idea that the natural state of any bit of information is to be basically prevalent everywhere, to be copied everywhere, and but maybe it's hard to find. I don't know. And anything that can be shared, I think, will be shared. And if that's true, then what does a private life look like in a world where, in theory, all your information could be found? Because here's the thing: is that if we look at if we imagine that we were kind of living always on and all this data is being thrown out, the amount of data that's increasing has to transcend any ability for us to even analyze it or track it or what. And I mean, the reality is like, it's like us walking out into the street. We're visible, anybody can see us, but nobody tracks us because we're worthless. I mean, our actions don't have value.
But if you turn it around, the actions might get value at another state. So,
right.
And if they're somewhere in the system, not yours, but
Yeah.
findable by anyone who wants, in the future or in a different government or a different commercial situation, suddenly your walk across a square might be very relevant. And how willing are you to share something that happened years ago or in another continent or whatever?
Right. So this is this idea. So what's sort of changing seems to be this idea that that the past begins to become more important to us because the past can be completely recoverable.
Exactly. Timeline.
And in a certain sense, this is kind of a long now idea. What we're trying to say, we're trying to expand the idea that actually, hey, it matters. The past matters just as the future matters. And it's not just what happened in the last 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes. It's actually the past does count. And so that's one vision where everything is saved, everything is remembered in potential, and that's the important part. It's in potential because we can't remember everything. We can't pay attention to everything. I mean, not everybody's movements can be important and worth trying to figure out, but what's different is that they could, in retrospect, be important. And so that potential is sort of interesting, where you can always potentially become viewed in the past. How would that change our behavior? That's an interesting question.
It's out of my field. It's a very interesting one where you see that because we can analyze old DNA or old doping data, we suddenly see people getting taken away the victories of wins for 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and suddenly something they did 10 years ago, which would have happened 10 years ago, is relevant now. And it's a very strange situation.
Yeah.
So Kevin, do you think there is a certain line for you, a threshold, in terms of what is yours and what can be accessed, in terms of is it your face, is it your DNA profile, your neuro profile? And that's one question. The second question I have, do you think people need privacy or secrets to form their own identity, or do you think transparency is the way to move forward and to grow as a person?
No, these are great questions. I believe that both secrecy and anonymity are essential, critical elements of sanity, we'll call it, civilization sanity, whatever, individual sanity. However, I equate them with sort of rare earth elements like cadmium, arsenic. Okay, these are elements that are essential to cells, but in very high doses are completely toxic. And I think the same thing with anonymity and secrets is that they're, in a certain sense, they're needed. They're essential elements, but in very large doses they're completely toxic. And so we actually want to keep them to a minimum, but we absolutely have to have them. So I think the privacy that we require in terms of private, we need to have some privacy to be able to think out loud. To
as benefit, but I would say transparency might lead to less vulnerability and less growth. So I think there's a silver lining there.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think it's one of those kind of things where I think the more transparency you have, maybe the more growth you have, until like 90%, and then if you go to 100%, it's like, okay, you want to get rid of as many toxic elements in your body down to 99%, but then that last 10% you don't want to eradicate all of them. So what I'm saying is, it may be that the amount that you need is very, very, very small for the most part, and we don't know what that amount is, but I believe that there has to be some very, very small threshold that's needed. The same with anonymity. It's like, yeah, we want to have an option, but most of the times, most people behave better when they're not anonymous. And the times when we need anonymity should be fairly small and minimized. So, I don't know what the other answer is that I spent a lot of my youth hanging around with people in the developing world, and this kind of a more primitive time. And you know, the funny thing is that they spent a huge amount of their time, like some of these shepherd boys going out into the hills. They spent a huge amount of time all by themselves, with a lot of privacy, a lot of interior thought, and I don't think they were that much. They weren't better for it. I know that they weren't better for it. Any typical American teenager is far, far more social, far more engaged, far more plugged into this ecosystem, and I think that is good. I think that produces more fulfilled people. Now, if we always on and we have no interior contemplative time, I do think that is something that we should. I mean, I don't think it can be 100%. What we don't know is where that slider wants to be.
I agree totally. Yeah.
It seems like we just don't really know where that small part of privacy is that we want to keep.
Yeah,
for example, people were very upset about pictures online on Facebook or social sites, and nowadays it seems like, oh, we're sort of used to, so maybe that's not the part we want to save. Maybe it's some other part somewhere later on that's really the core.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you know, as someone I spend a lot of time thinking, reading quietly, trying to think. I do believe that there should be the option, but here's what I'm saying these days, and partly is that you know I've talked about the number of days the web has been around, whatever it is, 7,000 days now. I mean, I really think we're still at the beginning of this, and it takes more than 7,000 days for us to learn how to read. I mean, we spent a number of years very deliberately practice to learn how to master the last singularity we had, which was reading and writing. And it won't be a surprise to me that it'll take us more than 7,000 days to figure out some of the characteristics and the necessary skills for this emerging, always-on world. But it may take us a number of years of very deliberate practice to learn how to retain some of this interior contemplative aspect in this kind of a world. It may be something that we don't know naturally, just like we don't naturally read. We can't learn reading by osmosis. It has to be studied and trained. And it may be that we might have to train ourselves and our students to actually do this, turning this thing off in some ways.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe one last question for there was a fifth or sixth guy who wanted to join us, but he had some bandwidth troubles. And he said, if you would have to give one of the policy makers, say the Dutch policy makers or even the Californian, some advice on this technium, on the growth, on everything, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I think that we should try to, even if we have to, subsidize bandwidth to everywhere. So I think bandwidth or deregulating spectrum, all those kinds of things, we should really try to maximize bandwidth. That should be like roads and sewage. It should be in the commons, and we should have as much of it as possible. Everybody, kind of equal access to bandwidth. And then the second thing is, I think the other is in this realm of IP. Information wants to be free. The natural state of information is to be copies. We want to de-emphasize copies, and we want to let copies flow as much as possible. And so there's a bunch of consequences on that in terms of intellectual property and ownership, which is based on an old-fashioned idea of copies and doesn't really work in this new system. So there's a whole bunch of policy things that need to be adjusted for the new realm of copy world. And I think that in the same way, the economics, the change in economics brought about by this world really makes it imperative that people understand that we have a single economy. We have a global economy. We have a single thing that we're making this kind of planetary machine, and that as much as we want to have a sense of teams finishing first and our team finishing first, we have to think much more globally in terms of the benefits and the roles that people have in this global economy, and it can't be in trying to this technology wants to be global, and it wants to bring access to around the world, and so wherever we are, whether it's in the U.S. in Detroit or in Holland, I think we have to be more realistic about the way in which we are now plugged into a global economy. And I think that's another, without giving specific things, I don't know Dutch law or politics enough, I think we have to open up, forget about, manufacturing jobs, because they're going to be done by either someone else cheaper or robots, and we can't be protecting things in the old economy. We have to let the new strengths blossom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I really appreciate you guys, particularly letting me ask some questions. That was really great.
Yeah.
And thinking out loud. I hope you enjoy the book if you get to it, either in Dutch or in English. And I really appreciate your attention, and thanks for making the technology work here. I think that worked okay. Great. So
one sort of tiny household question. Do you have the link to the YouTube?
We will. For some reason, it takes about an hour for them to bring it to us. When it's done, we will send it to you or post it or whatever.
Great.
But for YouTube, takes an hour for them to develop that link.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time, Kevin. Bye-bye.